Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Thursday afternoon's tutorial, where we have a few questions already regarding the practical. The practical due that's tomorrow. So the questions that came up, one from this morning is enumeration, and another one from today is looking at something similar to question E and question F in the practical. So that's basically enumerations and then saving an object to the file and then reading from the file again, but doing some form of calculation of the results as well, or with the read information. We only have one property method on travel card. Let's see. You'll probably need more than one. Let's see. Travel card has a property method associated to underscore trips. So yeah, it seems like you only have the one. Everything else is within the travel card itself, so it's not information that is going to be used anywhere else. So I guess it's safe not having property methods for them. You don't always have to have property methods for everything. I know I always do it by default, but it's technically bad programming practice just to create property methods or accessors and mutators for everything, even if it's not going to be used. All right. So before I get a start on this, is there anything else you guys want me to show while we look at enumeration and sequential files, essentially, with a calculation of the read implementation of the sequential file? Just so we make sure we don't double back on something later on. Not at the moment. Okay. We'll see when we get there, I guess. All right. Now, let's get Visual Studios open and let's get the show on the road. Now, I think it's going to be easier if we just create a new blank tutorial. I think my machine is feeling the weather as well. Look at that, it's already October. I didn't even realize that. You guys do realize, including this week, there's only 4 weeks left, right? And if you exclude today, there's only 3 weeks left, of which one of those weeks is a semester test, so technically there's only 2 weeks left for you guys. All right, let's look at what we can look at. Yeah, time is flying. It's crazy. That must mean the subject is fun if time is flying, because you know time flies when you're having fun. This is where I need my cricket background noise. All right, so the first one we will have as, call this one save, and the second one we'll have as read. I'm glad you're enjoying it. We're trying our best. All right, I think let's try and do, no, we need to do a class. All right, what class are we gonna do? So take something that's too similar to your project. You know, I can't kind of give you all the code. Let's call this, what are we gonna call this? Something with a calculation. You've got the cheapest on that side. All right, I've got an idea. We'll take student and student question is, I'll look at your question now. Okay, no imports are not coming here. And then we'll create our variables. We'll just keep it simple. I think those two will suffice. Let's create a constructor for ourselves, just to make things easier as well. And then we'll have and then we probably need output. Let's just go for display function. Okay. So we've got a student class. Keep in mind I'm going to make intentional mistakes, so you guys need to focus. So we've got our student class, we've got a name and a mark. We've got a constructor just to get the name and the mark there, so we don't have to use property method right now. And we've got a display function that will output the name and the mark of the student. And remember, we're going to save all of this to a file. So let's just make things easier here for us. At our reference, we know we're going to work with files, so we can add our imports at the top already. So we have our system.io. We've got our system.runtime serialization.formatter. I think it's formatters though. Formatter.binary. There we go. And we'll begin by declaring our file stream. And our binary formatter. And then we'll just do an array for our student as well. So we can go student, let's go class, keyword. Unless you count your group assignment, then yes. Ugh, multitasking is not my strong suit today. Right, so we've got our variable over here, we've got our file stream, our binary formatter, and our array of students. So you'll see this as test results. So you've got a student name, we've got a student name and a mark for the student, and then we've got our array that will just contain the student you are doing. So for the first one, we're going to save it to a file, and the second one we'll read from the file and do some form of calculation there. Now, first things first, enumeration. I need to add enumeration here. Did not think of this. Where can I add enumeration here? I did not think of that now. I have a mark. Can't do a range. You can probably do a symbol. Year of study. Yeah, but where are we going to calculate that from? You see, I want to do something that's at least similar to your assignment, and your assignment has a function that, come now, that will output mode, a function that returns a string based on the given integer value. So bus, minivan, boat, and train, and then you've got the values 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, I guess I can actually do that. All right. Gender as integer. Oh, this is going against my. So bad. All right, we'll take enum gender, and then we'll do. It's going to take too long. I don't want to do something that's going to take too long. Oh, I can already see the issues here. Fine. Make it. You can make it binary as well. Let's make it binary. Make it a bit more fun. All right. So we've got male is 1, female is 0. So we can also technically do a Boolean over here. And then we can just call a function. This is where we can use it. Aha. Good for whoever called gender. You gave me an idea for a function. And we'll go gender. And the output will be get gender. And then a new line. Then our function, make this a function. We need input. Let's see. Function that returns a string based on the given integer value. So let's give it a value. This will just be underscore gender. And then what we'll do, I'm making a mistake. The value is oh, I need a name. No wonder. And then all we have to do is just compare this. So we can go select case value. We can go case male, which we return male. Otherwise, we can go case gender dot female, in which case we can just simply return that. And then one thing you need to keep in mind, if you're providing a value and you're doing a select case, is we're testing very specific values here. What happens if you're given a value that's not within this range? So you need at least a default output. That's also why it's highlighting green under here, because it's telling you not all paths return a value. So it won't crash unless you pass along an incorrect value, but you know, you need to address all executable paths, and if something incorrectly is provided, it unfortunately is an executable path. It goes along with, can we use case else? I honestly don't see the point here, because if it's not one of those, this code will execute in any case. And if it is one of those, it's going to finish inside. You can. It's not that you can't. You can do that. I just don't see the point in this specific example. Please note that it's just for this specific example. Don't see the point in doing it. The enumeration is done where you're going to use it. So if I was going to use enumeration in the form load, sorry, not the form load, in the form class, then I would put the enumeration there. I'm using enumeration in the student class, which means I need to declare it inside the student class over here. It's not a global thing. So if I declare it in form, I won't have access to it in student. So you just declare it where you want to use it, and if you're going to use it in multiple places, you might have to declare it at multiple places. There is a way around it, but I'm not going to show you how to do that. It goes slightly outside the scope of what you need to be able to do. But you understand the concept of the enumeration. That's the only thing that's important. All right. So we've got our student class set up. We've got the enumeration here. So we give the function a value. We test it against the enumeration. And the only thing the enumeration is basically our options. It's male is 1, female is 2, female is 0. So we're going with a binary description. And we will probably have to add one here as well. Gender as integer. Should actually make this a string, retrieve the string value, and then test it against the others, but we're just going to make it simple for now. Right. So now that that's all done, we can go back to our class. So with reading or saving the information, okay, so enumeration is a set value. So you understand how a constant value works? A constant variable that never changes? Okay, enumeration is basically the same thing, but it's a set. It's set options. So to make things easier for us to read, so instead of saying case 1 return male, case 0 return female, we can say case gender male. Gender male just means 1. So if the value is 1, we output male, which means it's a lot easier to read in the code what's going on. So it just makes things a bit more readable for us. It doesn't actually affect the user on their side. And honestly, if you don't want to use it, you could just simply make this a 0 and a 1. It does exactly the same thing. But I mean, if I had to tell you, okay, come and look at this, and then go and describe it, you're first going to have to figure out what is 0 and what is 1. This one is easy because you can see it's male and female. But if you start looking at things that have more options available, for instance, like the boat function or the enumeration, what do they want you to call this enumeration? Transport mode. There's various different options. So instead of having to remember what 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 means, you could just go and say bus, minivan, boat, train, and the value will be there for you. It makes it easier to read. It makes it easier to use as well for the developer, that is. And if you have future editions, it also makes it easier to add things. So let's say you now hypothetically have to add more genders here, then you can just go and add more genders and the options will be there. But if I made female to be 1 and did not give male a number, will male automatically be 2? No. So if you are you referring to this now? Are you referring to that? Sorry, I don't know if your yes was before or no after my question.
So like, I mean, if I made male to be 1, in this case, will female be 2 automatically?
Well, so if you leave female out, so if you don't add anything.
Yes.
Most likely. So as you list the things, if you don't give it a value, it will start at 0 and increment from there, going downwards. I think it will show you, yeah. So here it will show you male will be 1, female will be 2. If you make male 1, then female over here will automatically increment by 1. But it's better for you to know exactly what the values are. So rather go and put the values in.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
All right. But good question. Good question. So yes, if you don't add the actual number, it will increment automatically by 1 for you. Because the default data type for this will be integer, but you can make it other data types. But like I said earlier, I think yesterday or earlier today, it's out of the scope of what you need. You just need to understand the concept. All right, where was I? Class, function, enumeration, yeah. So now that we have our class set up, we want to save the information to a file. So we're just going to do a simple test. So let's read our array. We'll test it out with, let's say, five values, and then we'll have our so weird having to start from 1. All right, we can make a name. We can make it student 1. We can make mark, let's see, 75, gender 1. It was 1, 0, right? Yeah, 1 and 0. And we can go over here. Student 3, student 4, student 5, 85, 95, and 5, and then 5. Make 0, 1, 0, 1. Let's see, questions. Why don't you do dynamic eraser? I just want to test it out. We've covered dynamic arrays numerous times. If there's enough time, I'll convert it to dynamic afterwards. But I just want to test it out and see that it works, so that you guys can see what's going on. But by all means, you can make it dynamic if you want to. I would recommend rather having it dynamic, but just for the sake of time, I'm making it static. So it doesn't like using dynamic arrays in live classes. It's not that I don't like using them, it's just it takes time to set up. Well, actually, it doesn't actually take that much time, I'm lying. It's just, given the actual values, I can quickly go and test the values. So for instance, if I want to go and test the max and the min, I already know the min's going to be 5 and the max is going to be 105. So in terms of demonstrating functionality, I can very easily show you that, okay, the value is confirmed, instead of having to go and set up a data test table and show you, okay, these are the tables we get, or these are the values you are going to test, and let's see if it works. You can very quickly see that it works or does not work. Right. So now we have our information. Now we want to store our information into our file. So we open up our file stream, and this is where I'm going to see how many of you actually concentrated. So the file name, so in your prac there is a file name that I give you, so we can make a const or a constant value. We'll make it file name. And we will call it marks. Right. So file name, then we've got our file mode, which will be create, and we've got our file access, which will be write. And we've got our binary formatter, which is just a default constructor or a parameterless constructor. Then we can start. Now for each object we have, we need to store it. So we know we've got 5 items, so we can go test, index as integer equals 1, 2. Now we know it's 5, but if you're working with a dynamic array, you'll go test dot length -1, because VB adds 1 more value there. And you will then start reading it. So it will be binary formatted dot serialize. You'll give it the information. So first you'll give it the file stream, and then you'll give it the information you want it to pass along, which in this case is test index. And then that will store it to our file. Now, here's my question. And then close the file stream. Now I've got a question for you, so let's see you focused. Is this going to work, or is it going to crash? And why? If you say it's going to crash, you have to tell me why it's going to crash. Crash because there's no serializable in the class? Yes. You have to answer yes. How can you just say yes to that? The question was, will it crash or will it not crash? And it's like, yes. Do you want tea or coffee? Yes. Like, no, come on, crash. There's no serialization in the subject class, or the student class, but yeah. The problem is we don't have the serializable tag. With the serializable tag, it will now work. Now, please note, it will work with and without the brackets. I just always prefer adding the brackets. It's an old coding habit of mine. All right, now, will this work? You can tell me. I think it should be straightforward now. Or am I tricking you? Let's see. Let's run. Let's see. All right, so I've got it. Click on save, and it seems to be working. So let's just go to our Solution Explorer, go into our file, go into our bin, our executable, and indeed there is our file. Please note that there is no associated program because I did not give the file an extension. You should, however, give the file an extension, but we can see there is our information. We've got 5 students. We've got student 1, student, just maybe do that. Okay, we've got student 1, student 2, student 3, student 4, and student 5. So all the information is there. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to read and do some calculations. Now, we're working with array currently, and based on what, sorry, let's just stop this. And based on what the practical said, let's just make sure of the description. I think my scroll build is going. In a separate text box, no, not that one. Save the cheapest trip object of each travel card object to a sequential file named with your student number and the extension IPB. You may assume that the file is saved in a local folder of the Visual Basics application. You may also create the file and save all the objects without having to create, close, or create and close again. That's a mouthful. Now, save the cheapest trip object of each travel card object to a sequential file. So that's basically going through each one of the travel cards and finding the cheapest one and then just saving the cheapest one. Just want to see if it's this 2 files that would be. No, it's only the one file. You're only storing one thing. So we've already saved. You'll kind of just, before you save everything, create an array of just that one trip, and then just take the cheapest one from each trip and save that specific trip. And then in a separate text box, display the average cost of all the cheapest trips. By reading them from the single file, your code may only rely on any variables that have been your code may not rely on any previous variables that have been previously used, determine how many trips in the file. So we need to keep track of it as we go along. So there's 2 things we can do. First, we only need a specific value. So to make it a little bit similar, let's say we're going to track the average mark of all the students. So we've got 5 students stored currently, and what we want to do is we want to go and track the average number or the average mark of the students. Now, aside from us creating the file stream and opening up the file stream, so I'll just take that over there. This is now open, and this is now read. You can tell me where are we going to start from here. So it's just an average function, but how are we going to approach this? So without giving me the code for it, how would you guys do this? There's a few ways you can do this. I want to see how you guys are going to do this. I'll be saving or reading. We're reading. So you're reading from the file, and then you're calculating the average mark for everyone in the file. So you say a while loop. Anyone want to add something to that? So we'll have our while loop. Our while loop is file position is less than file length, which basically just makes sure that we have something in the file itself. I think I spelled my position incorrectly. Same with my length. Right. So we're checking that the length of the file is larger than the current position, which means there is something still there. What's next? You said while loop. So what are we going to do next? Create an object. Okay. So let's go. Will this be an array or a single object? Single object. Okay. Right. What's next? There is, however, one thing I need to go and change. Otherwise, this is not going to work. We need a property method to get the markup. Okay, let's see. We've got temp equals direct cost. We've got deserialize, direct costed. Okay, so you're all correct, but let's just combine them slightly. So you want to direct cost, and you want to direct cost your binary formatted .deserialize, and then just take it from the file stream directly. So that will take whatever we have currently in the file stream, deserialize it, and attempt to direct cost it into a student, and then pass that along to temp. Right. What next? What do we do after that? Let's just close the file stream here at the bottom. Otherwise, I'm going to forget. Now, ask why the object is single. It's because you said single. No, it's because Malinga said single. There's two ways of doing this. You can do it doing a single object, or you can do it doing an array. It depends on how you see it, but you're not allowed to use any of the existing variables, so everything has to be local to the button or to the function. So if we do it like this, we've got our temporary variable declared, we've got our item, so to say. What do we have to do now? So the ultimate goal is to output, and we can put it in a message box over here, but the ultimate goal is to output the average mark of the students. Temp.mark. Okay, but what is that going to do? We must work out code for temp. What do you mean work out code for temp? Temp is there. We already have temp. We're trying to calculate an average, and the mark is there. It's just one mark. Each student only has one mark, so there's nothing inside student that we can do other than just retrieving the mark itself. You guys are really overthinking this. What is our purpose here? What are we trying to achieve? Break it down to what you want to do. What are we trying to achieve here? calculate an average mark. Now, regardless of the file stream itself, how do you calculate the average mark? I know it's difficult not to overthink things, but that's why I'm telling you. Ignore the additional things. Focus purely on what you want to do. Find sum first. That is correct. Total divided by number of elements. That is correct. Which means, what do we need? Total divided by the number of students, yes. But what do we need? What is missing here? What do I need to add here to make that possible? For loop, like a variable sum, yes. So we declare our, I'm going to do it at the top, or so we've got dim sum as integer. Anything else? So I'm going to assume sum and total here is the same thing at this point. Okay, so sum is easy, right? So it's going to be sum plus equals 10 dot mark. And then we'll probably just set sum to 0. Let's just set sum to 0 so we know we start on 0. So are we done now? Will that give me my mark? Can I go and say message box and then output my mark? Average. So what do we need to do to calculate the average? Okay, so in this case we know it is 5, but let's assume we don't know it's 5. Okay, you said divide by fs.length. Do you know what the length, do you know what that length represents? Not number of records, gets the length in bytes of the stream. So it's the number of bytes you have in your stream. So it's not an indication of how many elements you have, but how many bytes you have there. Your position is the current byte count that you have. So it will start at 0 bytes. It will read in the first items and then move to just be after that element you've read. So it's not to say that it's going to be 1 byte each. But it's a good guess. It's a good guess. But unfortunately, in this case, it won't work. What else can we do? Number of objects. Okay. How are we going to do that? Okay, but once again, you're overcomplicating this. Why do you want to go and check the number of bytes now? Have a counter variable, yes. Increase the counter by 1. Then all you have to do in order to get your final result, you just take your sum and divide that by your counter. There's your average. Now, just for interest's sake, just so that you can see what actually message box represents, I mean the length represents, let's go and look at that. Go and look at what that actually outputs so that you can see what it does. So why do we sometimes declare a local variable as object? What is the purpose of doing this? Where do you declare it as object? If you say object, what do you mean object? Are you referring to our custom class? We've never declared something of type object. You'll have to give me a reference to that because we've never declared something of type object. Object is the root of all data types. Maybe Mr. Cottrell can provide some clarity on that. I think he's still there.
Are they asking about the objects?
Well, they said you declared a local variable of type object.
Yeah, that's when I was doing the wildlife and I saved both lion and rhino. So I had two different objects coming into the deserialization. So I'd first deserialize it as an object, then do a type of, and then cast it. So I deserialize first to object, and then based on the object's type, I downcast it.
Okay.
And that's how I was using it.
All right. Well,
but there's no need to do it with what you're doing. You only have one type being saved to file.
yeah.
I did two types being saved to file.
It's one way of doing it. Look, so the idea behind what Ms. Cottrell did is the fact that there's not 100% certainty of the data types being stored. If I say data types, the class being stored inside the file. So object is the root directory of anything inside Visual Studios or inside Visual Basic. So everything is of type object. Essentially, everything inherits from object itself. So what happens is everything is of type object. So everything can be cast into type object. So he cast it into type object first, and then after that he tested to see what object type it is. Now, this depends on the file structure you're going to be using. If I say the file structure, I'm referring to what you're saving to the file. If you're saving numerous objects to a file, and they're all of a certain base class, then I would say you cast it into that base class, and then after that you test what they are. But if you're saving non-related objects together, In my personal opinion, you are going to make a massive mistake and you're going to regret it at the end. So always just be careful about how you cast it, but you need to cast it into a base class first. So type object is the safest one you can use because everything will cast into type object. And then determine after that what type it actually is, or be a bit more precise about it. Right, so that is a possibility. So you can go type object over here. Well, it won't like the direct cast over here because it doesn't want to cast object into temp, but you can, if you make this object, you can do that and then later on downcast it here. But because we only have one data type and we're only storing one data type, we're just going to use students. Okay. So yeah, that's one way of looking at it. Then you've got the rest of your values, and let's go and test it out. So the first thing we're going to see after we've read in the information is I just want to show you what the FS length is. So we save, we read, and do you see currently over here, we store 5 elements, and I'll open up the file so that you can see. Why do I click on the wrong things? Open up the bin, open up the mock. So you can see we still only have our 5 items in here. Item 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. When we look at the message that we got, it says FS length is 885. So if you use FS length as your divider, it's not the number of elements you have, it's the number of bytes being stored in the file. So that will be an issue. And then ultimately, we divide by our counter, because our counter track of how many records we have. We deserialize one item, increase counter by 1, add it to the total, so we've got one value in sum right now. Well, the sum is the sum of one value. And then every time we read from this file, it increases counter by 1, adds it to the sum. So when we are done with this while loop, we've read everything in the file. We know how many times counted the object being added to the sum. So that is why we are dividing by the counter. Because we know that is the number of elements we had. So the result was 73. So because we're using test data values, we can always just go and make sure that it is correct. So 73, 80, 90, 105, and 5. Gives me 167. Divide that by 5, we got 73. So we see our result is correct. Now, the other way you can do this is you can declare a temporary array. You can always do that. But the problem with that is you don't know how many elements you're retrieving. So every time you go into for loop, you need to dynamically increase this array. You'll have to declare it outside so you still have access to it. And then you can go and do another for loop with all the calculations. But I mean, everything is right here. I've got the temporary variable here. I've got the value there. I can just assign it to sum and be done with it. There's no need to overcomplicate it. Why is it complaining now? What did I break now? I'm not sure what I broke now. Student. But oh, array. Because I'm not focusing. All right. So you guys see what's going on? You can do it with a single local variable inside your while loop, depending on what you want to do. Just keep in mind, it depends on what you want to do. If you need to do a bit more with the information, you can set the local variable outside the while loop, and then once you've closed the file stream, you can continue. I'm assuming that helps the person that asked for question E and question F, and the person that asked this morning for the enumerations. I kind of think it was Omar that asked for enumerations, but I don't see him now. Unless I'm mistaken. Oh, did you? Alright. Both of your surnames start with a O, that's probably why I was just slightly confused. My bad. The important thing is I remembered someone asked. Alright, but do you understand enumerations now? Or the example we did with the enumerations now? No, man. Okay, we can go through that again. Let's see. Let's get the gender of the base mark. So when having an attribute of a derived class and the data type as the parent class, when in a for loop and I'm afraid you're gonna have to give me that specific example that gave you an error. Attribute of the derived class and the data type as the parent class. When in the for loop it has an error. How do you fix it? Well, I first need to look at the error. It says something as such as not defined in the parent class data type. You'll have to send me a screenshot of that error and the part of the code that's giving you that error. I don't quite understand the conditions revolving or surrounding your error itself. You can talk. The mics are open.
So will we also need a text box for question E? Or
Yes.
it just happens?
No, you have to use a text box. It says in a separate text box.
No, question E, so not F.
Oh, sorry, F. But F is, I mean, E is saving. Why do you need a text box there?
Okay, sir.
So save the cheapest trip object of each travel card object to the sequential file named with your student number and the extension IPB. You may assume that the file is saved in the local folder of the Visual Basic application. You may also create the file and save all the objects without having to create, close, open, write, and close again. So it's, you know, it's just saving to a file. There's no output required.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Okay, Mr. or Miss Oliver, sorry, I don't know your gender. Your preferred pronoun, I guess. Okay, Mr. Oliver. Let's quickly go over your enumerations here. So in our student class, we've got a data type for gender, and we're using integer for this. So what we're doing is we're saying that a male is represented by the value 1 and female is represented by the value 0. So our enumeration or our enum is gender, and then male equals 1 and female equals 0. The idea here is that when we want to use it in our function, so we've got a function here, so when we output our values, we call the function getGender, which will output the string of the gender itself. So it will output whether male or female instead of outputting the integer value. So what we do is we pass the value to this function, and we do a select case on the value being passed along. And to make things more readable for the developer, instead of having to say case 1 or case 0, we say case gender.male, and this ultimately just means case if the value is 1 and case if the value is 0. Now, the reason for this is if you have something like your transport mode where you've got a number of things, remembering the options, the specific option you have to use, can become a bit tedious and difficult over time. So having a specific reference, like saying gender.male, you know exactly what you're referring to. It's not a case of, I can't remember the number, if I guess it was 1, I guess it was 0. You know exactly what you're referring to. You're referring to the male gender in this case. And in the case of Prac 10, you're referring to a boat or a bus, a minivan, a boat, and a train, where equal to 1, minivan 2, boat 3, and train 4. Does that clarify things for you slightly? Okay. So it just makes it more readable. I've never actually had a situation where enumerations are change the logic of anything. It's just that it makes it easier to read. Because now if you have to maintain this code, you know exactly what's going on there. It's not a case of you not knowing what's going on. Oh, I know what I can add here. Let's see. It's an old joke. I wonder if some of you might recognize the joke. Right. So the enumeration itself is just simply a different representation of the value or of the option. If you look at the files, these file and file access, these are also enumerations. So when you open them up, you'll see the various options you have. So create new is option 1, create 2, open 3, open it, or create 4, truncate and append is 5 and 6. So you can see the actual numerical values for them. Now, if the function itself didn't ask for a enum, you could have just used simply 1 and 2. But in this case, Visual Studios or Visual Basics forces the fact that you need to use the enumeration, which makes it easier for you to understand also what's being referred to. Same thing. If I had to say, okay, I want to open this file, which one was opening the file again? Was it 3? Was it 2? Was it 1? Was it 6? You know, it's easy just to go file mode and I want to open the file. So it's very easy to see what's going on, and it makes it a lot easier for the developers. So you don't have to now keep on remembering the numerical value because there's a natural language word for it or a high-level term for it. All right. So I'm assuming that clears things up for you. Yeah. You can see these enumerations, you can open them up and actually see what they are. So for these, if you ever want to know more specific information, generally when they develop the languages, they give you descriptions for what they do. So there's the description for each one of these options and what they represent. So you can very easily just go and have a look at what these options actually do. The same thing for file access. They also have their own descriptions. So you can see what they do, what they are meant for, how they are being used. So it makes things easier for you, especially if you're learning a new language and you don't know what the various options are. You know, these comments will help you a lot in terms of what you're allowed to do or what you can do, especially the last two. I mean, we are not teaching you to use the last two, but I mean, these are things we've already kind of discussed very slightly, but haven't shown you. So when you create, that's something we tested on Tuesday evening. If you create, so let's say we do, where's our create function? Form, and let's just go and create. So we do that. So all we're going to do is create the file. We're not writing anything to the file, then closing the file. Now, you already know that we have information inside this file. So what will happen if we create? What do you think is going to happen? Those that attended the Tuesday evening class, don't spoil it. What do you think is going to happen? When I refresh this page, do you think there's still going to be something here? Do you think some of the information is going to be there? Do you think some of the information is going to be gone? What do you think is the case? All right, so let's see. We reload it and everything is gone. So what happens, my assumption is it sees that the file exists, it deletes the files and creates a new file in its place, or it takes the files and just nullifies everything inside so that there's nothing inside. It's either one of those two options. Now, in terms of overriding information, let's go back to our function again. Quickly execute this. So we just save, we close this. If we open it up now, you'll see that we have the information again. So we've got student 1 at the very top, student 2, student 3, student 4, student 5. So let's say we want to add more students to it, but we've got to change the descriptions. So we are adding, say, 2 students, and it is student 20 or 10 and student 25. And they both are late, so they both get 0. Let's just change this to just accommodate those two in any case. So you've got the fact that we have information inside this already. So what do you think is going to happen now? Do you think it's going to override the information in terms of delete everything and only have the two options in there? Do you think it's going to override everything? All right, so let's see. Refresh, and yes, only those two items are showing. Now, let's test one more thing. So let's just add these back. Run it, get back the original file. Reload it. Just for interest's sake, we're going to open the file. So we know the file exists now. I'm going to open the file. So it's student 25 and student 15. And we're going to save these two to the file. What do you think is going to happen now? Still override? Do you think it's going to override? What is it going to override? So how many records will I see? How many students will I see in the file? 2. So we're opening the file, storing new information, but we don't say where. Now, it is a sequential file, so where is it going to start? At the beginning, right? So when we open an existing file, it won't delete the information, but when we save information, it's still going to save from the start. So as you can see, it overwrote the information we had, and it saved the new information over the old information. So we've got student 25 and student 15, but we still have student 3, 4, and 5 over here. So it only overwrote the information that was at the top or at the beginning of the file. So it's always important to note when you're opening a file what you're doing with it, especially if you're writing to a file once you've opened it and you know there's already information inside there. Well, in your scenario, we're not going to ask you to add to an existing file, but remember when we spoke about the options here with the enumerations? One of these options are truncate and append. So opens a file, if it exists, and seeks to the end of the file or creates a new file. This requires system.security permission to file IO permission access.append. Permission file mode append can also be used only in the conjunction with file access.write, trying to seek to a position before the end of the file, throws a system.io.io exception, and any attempt to read files and throws a system.not supported extension. So append, what they're basically saying is append will open up the file. If it doesn't exist, it will create a file, and it will put the current file pointer at the very end of the file. So instead of beginning at the beginning of the file, it will put the pointer at the very end of the file, and that's where it will begin writing. So you won't overwrite anything if you use the append function or the append option. Okay. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that you can do. You just need to kind of explore them. All right. Are there any other questions? Anyone that's struggling with anything that you need to look at?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to clarify something.
Yeah.
If in the question, they say save the cheapest trip object of the travel card object to a sequential file. So in this instance of the one that you created, what did you use as a substitute of this so I can get it clearly?
So this is now a save. You need to get the cheapest trip. So each travel card has a variable. So you've got the cheapest trip, you're saving the index of the cheapest trip, and you just want to save that information. So what you'll potentially do, or what you'll most likely do, is you'll open up the file stream, and then you will go to each one of your travel cards and just go to the index of the cheapest trip, and then submit that information, or that specific class.
Just to add to what Mr. Investors said, remember you're saving the object, not the index. Just to avoid confusion there, you're saving an object, not index.
You're saving the trip object.
Because a lot of you are thinking of just saving the index, which is incorrect.
Yes, I assume that clears things up for you. Well, that is the local directory. That's where it's going to save. If you don't save it there, then you need to put in the directory of where you can find it. So when you submit your code to be evaluated, if it's not the local directory and you just use the file name, then it will most likely crash your program because the file isn't locatable or can't be found. So it's safer just to put it inside the debug folder. Yes.
Will we use delimiters to like separate data, the fields, and then like we can sift through and pick what we want?
If memory serves, let's just see. 'Cause I think
Not
you
in
only do that in
informatics.
Java.
Not in informatics 1. I can already tell you not in informatics 1. Later on maybe, but not here yet.
Just want to look at the learning guide, then I can tell you exactly what we'll still be doing. But we won't be looking at the limiters specifically. Look, when you start working with files specifically where you want to find specific terms or where you need to search and categorize them yourselves, you do that in Java next year. In Java 2.a, if I'm not mistaken. That's when you start working with the file streams or with streams directly.
ComSci 2A.
Yes, what did I say? Informatics.
Java 2A.
Oh, I mean
You
computer science
seriously
2A.
coffee.
Because there they actually teach you how to send emails in your code as well.
Okay. What the students we still need to do this semester is finishing off random access files. We have to do collision handling, just the theory. We have to do transaction and merging of files, and still social aspects of IT.
Yeah, so we're almost done. So we did random access today. We'll probably cover it next week, Monday again, and then as of Wednesday, we'll start looking at collision handling and merging. And then that week of the semester test, we'll most likely only discuss the semester test things, depending on how things are. Otherwise, we'll start moving over to the other concepts. I'm assuming you're very eager to get on to delimiters. It uses a different stream, by the way. Right, so I'm going to start the recording here because it seems like the questions that are coming through are not relevant to the topic anymore. So if you're watching the tutorial, I hope it helped you. Otherwise, please make sure you come to Saturday's tutorial. I will check with Mr. Singh. It seems like we didn't do a Saturday TUT for Prac 9.
We did.
Was there one?
He did it in the boot camp revision morning session.
Oh, okay. So you'll see revision 1. It's on Blackboard. Revision 1 contains the Prac 9 memo then.
Or
Yeah,
bootcamp 1.
It's in the recordings. You'll see it's labeled
No. Don't go there. Go to learning guide and prescribed reading material. On your side of the side. No. This van de Westhuizen.
But I'm just showing them it's here as well.
Yeah, but that's a very big file.
Oh.
It's a 1 gig to almost a 1.5 gig file.
It will be down here as well. Is it really that big?
Yes. It is seriously that big. I can tell you the exact size of it. I've got them on my machine still.
Revision 1. I want to see how big it is.
Revision 1 is 1 gig. I told you.
Yeah, that is larger than I expected.
I managed to get it down to What did I get it down to? 200 megabytes.
Can already see that Blackboard is not the fun download location.
So please, for the students, don't download directly from the Colab. Rather go down to where Mr. Van der Wesen showed you. Those are compressed versions and a lot smaller. There's a correction.
Alright.
What is the correct way to? What
Yeah,
is the
but,
correct way?
Sorry, I don't want the stream to go on too long because we're still recording over here. So for the students that are watching the recording, if you have any struggles, please just drop us a Discord. You can also email us. Please note that we're not responding to private messages on Discord. So if you're trying to contact us via the private messages and we're not responding, it's because we don't respond there. We respond via email. So yeah, and if you have a query regarding your practicals, please make sure you leave it on the Google link. You'll find that on Eve. And otherwise, just ask us in the lectures and we'll discuss it there. So, if you're struggling, please make sure you come to the Saturday TUT. Prac 9 is under revision 1, which you'll find under the learning guide section or the lecture section. Otherwise, you can just ask us and we'll link it in. It's linked in Eve as well. So,
YouTube is, yes.
and it is on YouTube as well. Set your own size or quality of stream. All right, guys, we'll see you tomorrow. The students that are top achievers, we'll see you tomorrow at the function. Otherwise, we'll see you next week during the lecture. And the assistants will see you during your prac session. Please make sure you come for your prac sessions. Please make sure you submit your last two practicals. Well, your prac 10 and then your group assignment.